Kent, whose most famous owner had 6 wives, Henry VIII. I'll also be at Chatsworth in Derbyshire, where Mary Queen of Scots was once held prisoner. But today I'm at Castle Howard in Yorkshire. Built in 1701, the estate has been home to the Howard family for 9 generations. The current owner is the Honourable Simon Howard.
This has been my ancestral home for 300 years. The family have looked after it, the family have made it what it is, and it's my intention to keep that going, and I don't feel I should let those generations down.
For Simon Howard, restoration is key to keeping Castle Howard going. However, the cost of maintaining the thousands of sumptuous fabrics alone can be enormous.
No, these curtains.
Today, Simon has to decide if he can afford to replace the curtains in the 18th century Long Gallery.
I think this will fall apart, though.
Probably.
Yeah, they can be.
Oh, yes, there's enough there.
They can be, but I mean, look at the state of things.
The present curtains were designed by Rosalind, the 9th Countess of Carlisle, in 1892. Since then, the Long Gallery has only been redecorated twice, but the curtains have never been touched.
What I'm thinking we ought to do here is go back to what was originally in the painting here,
Yes.
which had the festoon at the top, and then it was just gathered up around the edges, and it's fairly simple. It's sort of rosettes or something on the corners.
On the corner, yes.
Simon's inspiration comes from a painting done by a local artist, John Jackson. It shows the Long Gallery as it was when it was first completed in the 1750s. The room was originally intended as a gallery to display sculptures and paintings, but it soon began to be used for dining, reading, and even as an indoor playground.
When we redecorated the Long Gallery in about '86, we went back to the painting then to try and get the correct colour. I would say it was described as an upturned blancmange at one stage. Also, we put the furniture back as in the painting, so it seems a sort of logical follow-through to replace the curtains as in the painting.
The sheer size and number of the windows means it's likely to be hugely expensive, and each project has to take its place in the queue for funds.
We may look at furniture, we may look at paintings and say that they are in desperate need of restoration, but we have to think of the facilities that the public use. For instance, last year and the year before in fact, we reinvested in our loos in the house to the tune of about £120,000. And that's the sort of thing that takes precedence.
Replacing the curtains is just one of several costly restoration projects. This year's total restoration budget, £250,000, won't cover all projects. It's up to Simon to decide which ones get the go-ahead. This pile of stones was once the magnificent Temple of Venus, a folly designed by Hawksmoor in 1731. It survived for some 200 years until it eventually fell down in the 1940s. There are plans to rebuild it, but in the meantime, priority must be given to outbuildings that are still standing. All the buildings in the grounds are Grade 1 or 2-star listed and are therefore costly to restore. However, they're eligible for grants from English Heritage. One in urgent need of repair can be found deep in Pretty Wood, a folly in the shape of a pyramid. Architects Peter Pace, Giles Proctor from English Heritage and Head of Building Services Chris Metcalf want to assess the damage being caused by a sycamore tree.
It doesn't actually take long, once vegetation gets a grip, for it to start to deteriorate rapidly. I have a picture of this monument in 1987 where some of the stones had fallen, but certainly the upper part was looking very quite sound. So within a relatively short period it deteriorated very rapidly. This could collapse next year. Once this is gone, the inner core is then exposed. That would weaken. The other sides are in poor state too. Once this surround has disappeared, the upper pyramid, which is quite good condition, would very soon have no proper foundations, and that would topple over. And you could come back here in a few years' time and find a heap of rubble.
It's thought the pyramid was built by architect Nicholas Hawksmoor in the late 1720s, but its purpose is a bit of a mystery. One theory is that it was created as an amusing addition to the estate's landscape for horse riders. English Heritage are keen to see it restored.
it's a very remarkable thing. I mean, there aren't many pyramids tucked away in woods in Yorkshire or the rest of the country for that matter.
Full restoration will take around 2 months to complete. English Heritage have agreed to pay 40% of the £33,000 cost. The rest of the money will have to come from the estate revenue. Looking after the inside of the house is just as important as the outside. In the late 19th century, Castle Howard had more than 20 domestic servants. Today, the Howard family only occupy the east wing of the house, and their needs are met by just one private housekeeper, Gwen Hatfield.
I think we might think about some in the sitting room, one in the sitting room.
That'd be a real good idea.
Simon depends on Gwen to look after the part of the house that the public never sees, and consults her on all the housekeeping details. Today, they're choosing log baskets for the private bedrooms, used by Simon's personal house guests.
No, let's try these ones here. Oh, I think the big one works there straight away, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that looks good.
Yeah, that looks
That's
great.
great.
And then
Yep.
Mrs. Trum's in here with all the logs she likes. Be well aware.
Right, so it's two big ones and one medium. Was it 3?
3 big ones.
Was
three
it? Oh,
big-
third one,
yeah,
yeah. Third
yeah.
one, Castle Howard bedroom.
That should be a fine.
That should do the trick, shouldn't it?
That'd be champion. Yeah.
Good. Gwen is key, in fact, to the whole thing. Because if it wasn't for her, beds wouldn't be made, the house wouldn't be kept clean, and she sort of keeps the whole thing ticking over.
Gwen's duties include keeping the antiques and collections in the private rooms clean. This is one of 12 rooms she dusts every day.
You do have to be careful in the sense that you don't want to be knocking anything off. I must admit I don't try to think about it because it makes you nervous. So if you don't think about how old they are or what they might cost, you can clean them a lot better. If you break anything, they're very good about it, so long as you own up that you've broke it.
Inevitably, it's going to happen. And you hope it doesn't, but sometimes it does. And I would say for the amount of items in the house, the amount gets broken, we are incredibly lucky. They're very careful with the pieces that they deal with. They know that there are some very valuable pieces in the house. But at the end of the day, you know, it's just life.
Something that Mr. Howard collects is hippos, something we've always been interested in, and everybody buys him a hippo of some sort every Christmas and birthday. It was to do with a photograph that he had done once, and one of his friends said that they thought it reminded him of come out of water and looking a bit like a hippo. So I don't think that's very nice, but he took the joke, and it's nice to see the collection grow.
The collection is now so large that part of it is kept in Simon's dressing room.
There's an awful lot, but I've never dared count just how many. But I keep thinking 100. It's a bit heavy going trying to dust them all, but it's still fun. I rather like the mug. Imagine having a drink out to that.
Castle Howard is surrounded by water, with artificial lakes to the north and to the south. But perhaps the most spectacular water feature of all is the Atlas Fountain, designed and installed 150 years ago by William Nesfield, premier landscape gardener of his time. The fountain depicts Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders, and he's surrounded by mythical sea creatures. It weighs 24 tons, and after being displayed at the Great Exhibition in 1851, it was dismantled, brought to Castle Howard by train, and painstakingly reassembled. The fountain was first switched on in 1853, and is always in full flow when the house is open to the public. Today, though, there's a problem. Head groundsman Brian Dayton has been sent to investigate.
The problem with the fountain is the shell behind me has stopped working. The upper ring, where the water is collected, there's a set of roses, and those occasionally get blocked up with leaves and feathers from the birds and ducks which come into the fountain. So we've got to clean the top ring out to let the water flow back through into the shell to form the overflow effect, the waterfall effect from the shell.
The fountain is carved from Portland stone, and when it was built it cost just over £1,000. Today, it's considered priceless. Brian wants to get the block jet working as soon as possible so that visitors can enjoy the fountain in all its glory. Back inside the house, Simon is deliberating about the much-needed new curtains.
I'm not sure that they shouldn't be a sort of rose velvet. Of course, what we have to think of here is that this room is used for dinners and so on and so forth, so they've got to comply with current legislation on fire.
It certainly would add to the sort of warmth of the room if you...
It would. If they were velvet, I think they'd be rather nice, don't you?
How high do you think that is? About 6 metres?
5.35 actually.
Thank you.
It's up to textile refurbishers Jan and Sue to calculate how much fabric is needed and to get an estimate. Only then will Simon know if the budget will stretch to replacing the curtains. Castle Howard is home to many fine examples of architecture through the centuries. One of the most unusual is the Howard family mausoleum, the largest private tomb in England. Unfortunately, it's in need of large-scale and extremely expensive repair work. Nicholas Hawksmoor began work on the mausoleum in 1729 as the final resting place for the third Earl of Carlisle. However, the many changes to the design meant it took 16 years to construct, and the Earl died before the work was finished. According to his wishes, he was buried in a local cemetery and reinterred when the building was completed.
The mausoleum is a Grade 1 building. It's probably actually the most important building in terms of sort of world significance, and it's obviously something we're very keen to rescue.
Unfortunately, the building has had to be closed to the public because it's in such poor condition.
There's a lot of stone very loose all over the building, as well as the entrance steps and the parapets are loose. It could easily result in someone being killed or injured.
Most of the structural damage can be put down to just one 18th century building technique.
This is a wrought iron cramp, which we use for holding the blocks of stone together. And basically the idea was that you've got two pieces of stone with a joint there and a vertical joint there, and to prevent the two pieces going like that, you cut in pockets to take the cramp, which drops into the pockets, and the iron rusts. And iron, as it rusts, expands several times its original size, and that puts an enormous amount of pressure on the stone. And to release the pressure, you get cracks developing, and then the pieces of stone fall out, usually in a sort of wedge shape, and causes a lot of damage to the building. Virtually all the problems we're looking at on this building are because of these iron cramps. If they hadn't put these in, the building would have been in virtually perfect condition.
The use of wrought iron cramps dates back to ancient Greece, where they were used in the construction of the Parthenon. There, unlike Britain, the climate suited the method.
The only reason they put these in was because it was a very expensive building in the first place, and they thought this was the right thing to do, and for a really Rolls-Royce job, you put in these cramps.
The cost of restoring the mausoleum is huge, which is why so little work has been done.
It is seen as being such an impossible building to do anything about because of the expense.
In the 1970s, the mausoleum underwent some essential repair work. The 20 vast columns were dismantled one by one, and the crumbling stone replaced to make sure the building didn't collapse.
The cost of the renewal to the columns was over £1 million, which gives you an indication of the scale of the problem. And the whole fabric was actually insured for £45 million, just in case some major catastrophe happened where you had some domino effect and the whole building collapsed as the release of pressure made it unstable.
Could have been a huge advantage, because then you could have had a new mausoleum built for £45 million. You wouldn't have had any of these problems.
Estimates for the total repair work could be up to £2 million, so the restoration will have to be done in small phases over the next few years. Simon Howard is in discussion with English Heritage about funding for the first phase.
Slight health and safety problem with the back of the balustrade here, but nothing we can't sort out in the next 20 years.
Over at the house, Gwen has to clean the silver chandelier in the private dining room, a job that needs doing every 3 months.
Jonathan, when are you going to clean it?
Gwen got her job through her cousin Dorothy, who's a housekeeper in the public wing. Gwen's been at Castle Howard for 10 years, but says it took a little time to settle in.
I have an awful habit of calling everybody love, sweetheart and darling. It doesn't matter who they are, high, low or whatever. I used to say it to Mrs. Howard when I first came. She'd ask for something to be, could you just do so-and-so, Gwen? Yes, darling, not at all. Oh, don't mind, you're welcome. And she went to my cousin and she said, I think she said you could just ask Gwen to stop calling us sweetheart and darling, please. So I found it very difficult because to me I was being false then. The house had to watch my words because I was so frightened of coming out with it at the wrong time. I've learnt now not to do it so often.
The chandelier is silver-plated and dates from the 19th century. It was probably electrified in the 1930s, but a few years ago, Simon restored it to its original usage, holding candles.
We have used the chandelier in the dining room, and particularly at breakfast time when it was so dark one morning, we had candles not only on the table, but also in the chandeliers, because one thing I forgot when I de-electrified it is there is no other lighting really in that room. So for a dark winter's morning in there for breakfast, it can be quite tricky to read the papers.
As well as doing the cleaning, Gwen is responsible for the Howard family's personal laundry. Over the years, she's become a trusted member of the household.
You need an awful lot of discretion and trust. And yes, you hear a lot and you see a lot. It's definitely the three monkeys job, definitely. But it's trust on both sides though there, because they know that you're not going to say anything of what you hear or see.
Gwen does the work that once needed 24 different people. In the late 19th century, domestic service employed large numbers of women. The 1881 census reports that 1 in 9 females over the age of 5 was an indoor servant.
Sometimes when you're doing the work, you think how hard it must have been for them. You know, running up and down the coal and doing fires and everything had to be just so for them. I mean, although things have to be nice now, we are lucky enough to be able to have all the instruments and things to use with it. You've got hoovers where, I mean, before it was carpet beaters, and I certainly wouldn't have liked to have been in those days doing all that, pumping and carrying and getting everything just right. Everybody has something that they're good at and all that they enjoy. And there's not many people can say they enjoy their work nowadays, but I certainly enjoy this. And it's seeing everything come to life and everything's kept clean, so it's really good. Hopefully I'll be here till I retire. I'd like to be, because it feels like home and you're told to treat it as if it's your own. And I know the work, I know the people, I enjoy the place, I enjoy everyone. So I hope to remain by the time I've retired, to just a few more years.
Back at the Atlas Fountain, gardeners Neil McCulloch and Mark Franklin arrived to fix the blocked water jet. Their first job is to get to the middle of the 6-foot deep basin to clean the rose that feeds the jet. Rather than emptying the fountain every time a jet gets clogged, Neil and Mark have a novel way of solving the problem.
I quite enjoy it actually. There's a bit of risk element there of falling into the water, which always keeps you alert. But no, it's very interesting.
It's pouring with rain and freezing cold, but on better days, the cleaning of the fountain has seen its fair share of fun.
I was on top once cleaning the top out. I had my back towards them and decided to row away, and they turned the fountain on me. They thought it was quite funny.
But in weather like this, the lads haven't got the time or inclination for practical jokes.
Bash, it stinks a bit. Bash, like soup in bottom of here.
As suspected, Neil discovers that months of accumulated debris has caused the blockage.
There's only a bit of moss in this one this time. It's mostly that algae.
Back on dry land, it's time to find out if their cleaning session has done the trick.
Yeah, when it's flowing properly, it looks better than having jets at one side spurting about 3 or 4 foot up in the air and the other jet's not working at all. it's quite satisfying to see that you're keeping it maintained.
Repairing the Atlas fountain is one of the less expensive jobs on the estate. Many stately homes face an ongoing struggle to balance the books. Castle Howard is no exception.
This house was built as a vainglorious idea, and it was for the enjoyment of the family. It's a completely different environment now. We share this house with the public. After all, we're a tourist attraction now.
Castle Howard attracts 200,000 visitors annually, who pay an entrance fee of £7.50. However, this barely covers the bills. Heating and lighting the public areas alone costs £34,000. Simon is always looking for new ways to raise money to meet total running costs of £4.5 million a year.
The money to build this house came from income from the estates. What you have to remember is that agricultural income was vast in those days, and labour was a lot cheaper. But today things are very much the reverse. Labour is very expensive, agriculture is in decline, and it's in a terrible situation at the moment. Forestry is not much better, and tourism is quite a struggle. And what we're looking at today is how do we enhance the income from other parts of the estate, such as commercial rents and so on and so forth. And that's what we're having to do. We have to look at every department and make it really sing for its supper.
It's these sorts of issues that will affect whether the curtains for the Long Gallery can be made. In their makeshift sewing room, Jan and Sue are completing their calculations.
So a round figure of approximately 300 metres of 140 centimetre wide.
It's decision time for Simon. The fabric samples and estimates have arrived.
We know it's 300 metres, and we know roughly what sort of figure we're looking at, which should be sort of 15 to 20 pounds a metre of the material. We may have to have it specially woven to the right colour, because all the colours that we've got so far don't quite come up to what we're after. Of course, what I haven't included in there is the lining material, and with labour and so forth. So the budget's looking as though it could reach sort of £20,000 by the time we finish, just to redo the curtains in this one room. And that's with sensible discounts and so forth. Well, we'll have to somehow find that in next year's budget.
This year, other restoration projects have taken precedence over the Long Gallery curtains.
That's tomorrow at 3 here on 4, and you can continue your journey behind the scenes of Britain's great estates by ordering a Channel 4 booklet priced £4. Just call the credit card order line on 0870 400 2240 or go to channel4.com/plus.